Hey, today I would like to talk about uh, missed buys. Times where you had an opportunity to buy something and for whatever reason you didn't do it and you regretted it ever since. I've had conversations with Nick about this before, and we both have things that we wished we had bought and we didn't, and you kind of regret it. It's kind of your Moby Dick white whale story, I guess. But the first one I remember pretty clear is I was in a little comic shop. It's in a comic town, or sorry, college town, not too far from here. And I walked in, and this is the time period, it was after 92, 93 when I stopped collecting. So I wasn't actively seeking runs, like I wasn't buying Avengers or Batman or whatever every single month. So I just would kind of go in, and something that caught my eye, I might grab it. That's when I started reading trades and things like that. But I remember I walked in and I was looking at the different books, and Image kind of was, a newer thing back when this happened. And I saw a comic and I picked it up. Cover looked kind of, I wasn't sure if it was a Western or what it was. It had a sheriff on the front of it, standing in front of a window. And I opened up and it was all black and white on the inside. And then I started looking through and I realized, well, this is a zombie apocalypse story. So it was Walking Dead #1. And I remember looking through it and I thought, Jesus, artwork's kind of cartoony. I don't know, I think I was still really into superheroes then, as far as comics go. So I remember looking at it kind of meh and putting it back on the shelf. And I can remember there were stacks of them. No one was buying them. So, hence I think the show obviously drove it, but I think scarcity to a certain degree drives that too. But that was the first one that I missed. The next one was a little further back, same college town. I used to go through the newspaper. This was before eBay and Craigslist and all that wonderful stuff. You actually had to get the newspaper. And in my town, new want ads came out in the Wednesday afternoon newspaper. We used to have two newspapers in this town. We only have one now, but we had two back then. And the afternoon one, you could kind of get ahead of Thursday morning. So I would always get the Wednesday afternoon newspaper, go right to the want ads, and there was always stuff for sale. A lot of times there was comics for sale. So I would, as soon as I'd get that, I think it came out like at 4, so on my way home from work I grabbed the paper, and by 5 o'clock I was in the car if I was hunting for something. This is going back into the 80s when I was actively collecting still, and going on hunts. So there's one in particular that I saw, and there was a college kid in this same town, and he was selling his comics to make ends meet, I guess. So I get there, it's a typical college ratty, second floor apartment in an old Victorian house on Main Street. And he had some decent stuff, and I was looking through his books, and I had a pretty good stack going. And, I made him an offer, and he took it, and he said, well, I got one more basket. So he brings out a laundry basket, and he's got a bunch of these old, really beat up comics in it. And I start looking through them, and a lot of it are funnies, or they're old westerns from the 60s. And then I come across X-Men #1. And I grab it because, of course, as a collector, that's a key issue that you always want to get. But I looked at it, and it had obviously spent a lot of time in the sun. It was very, very tattered. The bottom staple was off. The top staple was still on, but the page quality inside was actually really nice. But it just was so kind of tattered. And I remember back then, I was insane with things that had perfectly sharp corners, no wear on the edge, colors had to be perfect, no dimples. I mean, I wanted all 9.4s or higher in my collection. Anything else was inferior, and I wouldn't collect it. So I remember I looked at it, and I think he was asking, he only wanted $50 for it, and I just kept putting it aside, and then I would look through and I would get some other books that he had in there. And finally, I think he got all the way down to $5, and I still don't know. I scratched my head over what I was thinking. Maybe it was because it was later in the evening. Maybe I had already spent all the money I had, but I passed. And looking back on it now, that it probably was, I would say, a 3.5, 4.0, but still, well, probably not even 4, probably 3.5, 3. Was with that pop staple. It was pretty rough, but I would love to have it in my collection because I don't have an X-Men 1, so that was a big regret, and it just you look at it now and hindsight's 2020. But what a dumb thing to do, and I regret it not buying it. But the worst one, and this is the one I'll save for last, I was again combing through the paper and I came across one, and this is the ad that every comic hunter collector wants to see. Selling my collection, 30 years. Comics are in boxes, so that, back then that was a big thing. No one had boxes. I mean, I had a few, but I didn't. So this guy had, I think it said 40 to 50 long boxes full of comics. So this guy had been collecting a long, long time. So he was in a small town, probably about 40-minute drive from where I was. It was the dead of winter. I remember there was a ton of snow on the ground, and I called the guy. He's like, "Yep, this is the first night." He said, "I've already had a few calls." So then, of course, I panic. I jump in my Delta 88 that I drove at the time. It was really kind of an old beat-up car. I was in college too, and I'm driving out there, and I get there, and you walk up 2 flights of stairs, and this guy was I don't know what he did for his main living, but he also kept peacocks. He bred peacocks, I guess, and stored them. So they made all kinds of weird, creepy noises, sound like little kids crying. So it was kind of a Silence of the Lambs moment for me at first. I'm like, I don't know if I want to go up in this attic by myself with this weirdo. So another guy gets there. Was from the same town as me. So all 3 of us go up together. He opens the door, and it was comic book heaven. It's like every comic book hunter's dream, where there was just boxes and boxes and boxes of comics everywhere. I looked over, and there was already a guy there, and I'd seen him before, and he always he was an older guy. He had dark hair. He had like graying hair like I do now at the temples. He always carried a briefcase with him. It had his list in it, and I think money or in a calculator. He would always do the same thing, because I saw him at least 3 or 4 times. He would, at shows or at private places like this, and the only thing I could think of is he must have known people that were in the paper, because he would get there before, like I'd get there and they'd say someone was already here, and I'd describe this guy, and they're like, yeah, that was the guy, and he would get there like at noon the day of the ad. So I think he knew someone at the paper that would tip him off about where these locations were, because there's no way that he could just stumble upon these things. But anyway, he was just finishing up going through, and he had a stack of probably 150, 200 books in front of him. The owner looked through the stuff. The guy, he said, this much, and the guy said this much, pulled out the cash, gone. I mean, he was in and out of this place in 10 minutes. So, I would see that guy frequently. I don't know whatever happened to him, but he got some great, great books, and I'll get in that in a minute. So I go in there, and at the time, this was Batman Death in the Family. So everyone was crazy about getting those. I didn't have them yet. So I go in, there they are. So I grabbed those first, and then I start grabbing current books to fill holes that I had missed, because I kind of had a gap in my collecting from probably like 85 till I started getting back into again 87 after I graduated high school, started college, so I got back into collecting. So I had 2-3 years of holes. So I'm going through, and I'm just grabbing these, and Walt Simonson, Thor's, and the Fantastic Fours that I was missing, and the Avengers. Meanwhile, while I'm doing that, this guy is just blasting through the boxes, and he's not really even looking at the issues. He would go back, get to like I don't know, 1971, 72, and he'd just grab all of them. He wouldn't even really look at them, and he would just set them aside. And he did this for the X-Men box, the Avengers box, the Spider-Man box, and just even after he left, there was a ton of great Silver Age books there. And my big regret is that instead of buying those books that I thought were going to be valuable or filled holes for mine, I just wished that I had gone back and got all of that Silver Age stuff. It is the location where I got my Fantastic Four 52. Kind of beat up. I remember at the time, I think he sold to me for like $1 because it was kind of rough. So that was kind of cool. But I did get some great Silver Age books from the guy after the fact that were just kind of left. But I could tell that guy got, Avengers probably 25 through probably 90. He just grabbed them, and then all the older Fantastic Four and Spider-Man, everything pre-71 and back. So that's my big regret on that one. Later I did go back and I'd buy more from the guy, and you get back and you look at what you bought, and then you realize, oh my gosh, there's so much more there. So I think I made 2-3 trips to this guy's house and bought stuff from him. I traded stuff with him. I had a lot of sports cards that he wanted to set up and do shows, so we did a lot of trading that way. But that was a big regret, and I always wonder whatever happened to the guy with the turtleneck and the briefcase. kind of look like Reed Richards a little bit. So I've never seen him. That was the last time I saw him, actually. After that, I had seen him at other shows and a couple other people's houses, but after that, I never saw him again. So I don't know if he wasn't local or what the deal was, but he was definitely a pro hunter back then. And I'm sure he got great stuff. But those are my big three regrets. You know, not getting uh, Walking Dead 1 when I had the chance just to buy it off the rack. Several of them because they were just sitting there. No one was buying them. X-Men 1, that was silly of me not just for $5 to grab that. Even if I had to put something else back to get that, that would have been a great buy. But this attic find, that's the once in a lifetime where you find an attic find, a real attic find. And this is before you could go and check eBay. This is before GPA, any of that stuff. You had comic values, whatever that newsprint kind of thing was. Comic values, I don't remember what it was called, Comic Values Guide, something like that. And then there was another one that was put out by a publisher called Attic, I remember I used to look at. And then Wizard came out a little bit longer, but even so, those things are so far behind on sales because by the time they get physically printed, you know, the market could have changed, especially nowadays, and theirs just wouldn't work with eBay and everything else out there. But those are my regrets. So this isn't a tag video, but it kind of is. So anyone that subscribes to this channel, if you collect, or even if it isn't comic related, I guess, a missed opportunity that you've regretted since not doing. You know, I know a lot of times we talk about collect what you like and all this stuff, but if you sell something and you know you sold for $100 and 2 months later you could have sold it for $200, you can't fret about that, but you can't not regret sometimes, and those ones still bug me. I kind of think of them when I go to shows now too. When I walk into a show and I think, oh my gosh, I could have had this or that, and it does drive you a little nuts. But anyway, so down in the comments below, I'd love to read this. I'm sure some of you longtime collectors out there have some stories of stuff that you can clearly remember the day, how warm it was out, what town you were in, all of that kind of stuff, and why you didn't get it. Maybe you're short money, maybe you didn't realize something was going to be valuable, but I'd love to hear these stories. So do a video if you want and reference this, that'd be cool, or just leave comments down below. Anyway, I guess I will see you all later, and keep reading.